final part of the lecture here. We're going to talk about ratifying the Constitution, the factions that came about, the Federalists and Anti-Federalists, basically almost the first two political parties, and then we'll talk about ratification. Okay, so the Federalists were for the new Constitution, supported it. They were for a strong central government or national government or federal government, whatever you want to call it. And those Federalists wrote Federalist Papers to defend the new Constitution throughout and they were dispersed through the colonies. James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay were a few of the major names in the Federalist, new Federalist party there. And then the Anti-Federalists were opposed to the new Constitution, believed it was an enemy to freedom and that the states didn't have enough power. And they also wrote essays and dispersed them throughout the colonies and pretty main Anti-Federalists. I would say Jefferson would be one, and a few others. But the compromise that came between these two after they kind of duked it out and fought it out was the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. So once the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists compromised and they came up with the Bill of Rights, the Anti-Federalists would plan on ratifying the new Constitution. The Anti-Federalists, small farmers, shopkeepers, laborers, preferred stronger state governments, a weak national government, direct election of officials, shorter terms, those type of things. The Federalists were mostly large landowners, wealthy merchants, professionals. They wanted a weaker state government because in the Articles of Confederation it really wasn't working, and the national government wasn't very strong, and so the Federalists wanted a stronger national government. Okay, and the Anti-Federalists really wanted to strengthen protections for individual liberties, which is why the Federalists compromised with the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. I'm not going to go over every amendment here in the Bill of Rights, but let's look at the basic protections. Protection of free expression, freedom of speech in Amendment 1, freedom of speech, press, assembly, and the freedom to petition government. Protection of personal beliefs in Amendment 1. The freedom of religion, so the government can't establish a state religion. The United States can't be a Christian country or a Islamic country or a Buddhist country or a Astro-Zoroastrianism country. Okay, they can't establish a state religion. And you have the freedom to exercise any religion you want as long as it's not hurting people. Okay. Also protection of privacy in Amendment 3 and 4. No quartering of troops in homes during peacetime. That was a big thing back then. It's not right now because we have places like Camp Pendleton, Camp Lejeune, all those crazy big Marine and military bases. And also Amendment 4, no unreasonable search and seizures. Okay, so a police officer can't search your vehicle because he feels like it. He can search it, if you have a bloody arm hanging out of the trunk. That's a reasonable search, but otherwise can't. Okay, protection of defendants' rights, Amendments 5, 6, 7, and 8. All right, there's no cruel and unusual punishment, right to a speedy and public trial, no double jeopardy, okay, or second prosecution for the same offense. That's double jeopardy, stuff like that. And then protection of other rights. Amendment 2, the right to bear arms. The Amendment 5, no taking of public property without just compensation. Amendment 9, power to the states, kind of people. And Amendment 10, again, powers not delegated to the national government or denied to the states are reserved for the states or the people. Okay. So let's look at how they ratified the Constitution. Federalists specified the Constitution be ratified by special conventions, not the state legislatures. 9 out of the 13 states had to ratify the Constitution, and they got 9 in about a 6-month, 7-month period. Delaware was the first to ratify it, December 1787. New Hampshire was the 9th, June 1788. Okay, let's look at the amendment process, informal process of constitutional change, and some flexibility in the Constitution here. Okay, amendment may be proposed either by 2/3 vote in each house or chamber of Congress, or by a national convention called by Congress at the request of 2/3 of state legislatures. That has never happened, the last one. Okay? So, usually, amendment is ratified, okay, I'm sorry, that was proposed, and this is ratified. Amendment may be ratified either by the legislatures of 3/4 of the states or by special state conventions called in 3/4 of the states. So here's a fancy little chart here that has the proposal process on the left, the ratification process on the right. Okay, you have to propose an amendment before you can ratify an amendment. So all of the amendments have been proposed by Congress by a 2/3 vote in each House of Congress. Okay, all of them except the 21st Amendment were ratified by the state legislatures, 3/4 of the state legislatures. Okay, one time, and that's when they repealed prohibition so everyone could drink, the state conventions ratified the 21st Amendment. That was the only time that was used. Okay, so there's 2 processes there, 2 alternative routes. Okay, 2 for proposal, 2 for ratifying. Okay, now that's formal changes to the Constitution, but an informal process is judicial interpretation, and that was established early on in 1803 by the Supreme Court case Marbury versus Madison. Basically established judicial review. It's almost like the Supreme Court gave themselves judicial interpretation or judicial review. Okay, and we'll talk more about that later. And then changing political practice. The political parties have changed. The electoral college practice today has changed the Constitution in ways. We never thought that there would be, these main 2 political parties, but that's how it ended up, and it has somewhat changed the Constitution informally. Okay. Other things that have changed it: technology, mass media, atomic weapons, computers, electronic communications have changed the Constitution. Okay, because it's there. We see news so fast now that it has affected, government's role and the Constitution. And then an increase on demand of policymakers. Life has changed from early on in the 1800s. It's much more complicated now. We're much more involved with the rest of the world. Everything is there right away. So that has changed the Constitution informally. Let's see. And the importance of flexibility. Okay, let's look at that. The Constitution created a flexible government that could adapt to the needs of the times without sacrificing personal freedom. Okay, so the framers, so basically the Constitution is a living document. Okay, it wasn't, the framers, founding fathers over 200 years ago didn't mean it to be static or written in stone. Right? Okay, so it's a living document. They, have allowed future generations to adjust it. That's why we have 17 more amendments, okay, to the Constitution besides the first 10, the Bill of Rights. So the Constitution is basically a pretty short document. It's only 27 amendments, less than 8,000 words. There's the preamble, which is the introduction, there's the articles, and then are the amendments. So it's a pretty short document. Most state constitutions are long and huge and very complicated. The United States Constitution is not. Short and pretty easy to read. Let's see. Let's look at understanding the Constitution. So basically what the Constitution created was a republic, which is a representative democracy based on limited government. Okay? So the United States is a representative democracy, or a presidential democracy nowadays, we call it. It's totally something new, 220 years ago or whatever. It was totally new. They decided to do it because of these enlightened thinkers. We have a pretty good, I'd say, government and a great constitution. Now, it's changing a little bit, but that's okay. We'll figure it out. It has been more democratized, I guess, if I can call it that, away from the elitist model that the founding fathers kind of put in there to a more pluralist one, which means more people have access to government, basically. Okay, so if we look, separation of powers and checks and balances promotes demands for public policy to be heard. So separation of powers, the executive branch has their own powers, the legislative branch has their own powers, judicial branch has their own powers, and each branch checks the other one. So there's a balance there. It promotes bargaining, compromise, okay? It promotes playing one institution against another, okay? And it promotes an increase of hyper-pluralism, which is pluralism gone bad, okay? Which means a lot of interest groups or lobbyists are somewhat running the country and not in making public policy and not the government. We'll talk more about that in later chapters. Okay, there's 43rd President of the United States, George W. Bush. Okay, somewhere in America. And I think that should do it. Okay, here's a summary here. Let you look at that. Okay, about the ideals behind the revolution and the Constitution. Natural rights, consent of the governed, limited government. Okay, and some responsibilities of the government. Okay. Questions? Okay, I think that does it. It's just a summary here. I'll actually go through it. If you guys want to look at it, you can pause the video. But I only have 50 minutes left, or 50 seconds, sorry. So I will go through a little bit, and if you want to look, you can pause them. Okay, so remember, this is just kind of a basic outline, basic lecture on the chapter. You do need to read, so please read and take notes if you want, and highlight, do anything you need to do. Okay, see you guys. Bye-bye.